The year was 1943, deep in the uncharted jungles of New Guinea, where the air was thick enough to swallow a manhole. Heat rose from the earth like breaths from an invisible beast, and every direction looked the same. Walls of towering trees, clawed vines, and shadows that moved even when the wind didn't. Lieutenant Hiroshi Tanaka, commander of a small Japanese scouting platoon, pushed through the undergrowth with the edge of his machete. The jungle fought back with every step. Thorny briars tugged at uniforms. Insects stormed exposed skin, and the smell, an earthy rot mixed with something metallic, hung over everything like a warning. "Sir," whispered Corporal Shurjin, his voice trembling, "the men say they heard something last night. Something moving outside the perimeter. Heavy footsteps." Tanaka didn't lift his eyes from the map. A cassowary, maybe a boar. The jungle is full of animals. Shurjin swallowed hard. "Sir, animals don't drag men away." Tanaka froze. 2 nights ago, Private Matsuda had vanished without a sound. No struggle, no call for help, no footprints. Only a smear of blood on a broken fern and a trail that simply stopped, as if the jungle had swallowed him mid-step. The other soldiers tried not to look worried, but fear hung in their eyes like smoke. "Stay focused," Tanaka ordered. "We continue to the ridge. Headquarters needs a report on the Allied movements." But even he didn't believe the words anymore. They walked until the forest dimmed into dusk. Fireflies drifted lazily through the air, glowing like miniature lanterns. The men set up camp near a ring of ancient trees, massive, moss-covered giants that seemed to whisper in a language of creeks and sighs. Tanaka wrote in his field journal while the men cooked rice over a small flame. Day 18. The jungle grows more sinister. There are noises at night, low breaths like something stalking us. Is it hunger? Curiosity? I cannot tell. A snap echoed through the trees. The men immediately fell silent. Then another snap. Closer. Into positions. Tanaka hissed. Rifles rose. Eyes searched the darkness. Yet nothing moved that a man could see. But the jungle breathed differently now. The air felt colder, heavier. A long, dragging sound slithered through the underbrush. Private Ishikawa stepped forward, squinting. "Sir, something's out there." A deep growl answered. Not feline, not human, something in between. Leaves shuddered, as if something enormous brushed past them. Then came a smell, thick, foul like rotting meat mixed with wet fur. Tanaka steadied his rifle, finger trembling on the trigger. "Who's there? Identify yourself." The jungle responded with silence. Then a whisper, a voice soft as dying wind. "Hungry." The men gasped. Ishikawa stumbled back, pale as bone. "What was that?" he shouted. Tanaka didn't blink. "Hold your fire." But the whisper came again, this time from behind them. "Hungry." The soldiers spun around wildly. Lights from their lanterns flickered like dying stars. Shurjin pointed a shaking finger toward the darkness. "Sir, something is moving in the treetops." At first Tanaka saw only branches. Then he saw the branches blink. 2 pale, glowing eyes stared back at him from the canopy. Unblinking, wide, hungry. The creature moved, its body silent but immense. Leaves showered the ground. The tree groaned under its weight. "Open fire," Tanaka shouted. Gunshots cracked through the jungle, muzzle flashes lighting the night like lightning strikes. The eyes vanished. Branches snapped. Something huge leapt from tree to tree, impossibly fast, impossibly quiet. The men shouted in terror, firing blindly at the dark sky. Then, without warning, a scream split the air. Ishikawa's scream. The lantern light swung wildly as Ishikawa was snatched upward, lifted into the darkness by something the men couldn't see. His fingers scraped against the bark as he tried to hold on. "Help me! Help!" His voice was cut short. Something dragged him away, swallowed by the endless black. Silence settled again. Tanaka's chest heaved. Sweat soaked his uniform. Shurjin whispered the words none of them dared speak. "Sir, we're not alone in this jungle." Tanaka slowly lowered his rifle. He finally understood. This was no animal, no man, no legend. Something ancient lived in the trees, watching, waiting, feeding. and it had just chosen its next prey. The jungle did not sleep after Ishikawa's disappearance. It pulsed with an eerie awareness, as if every leaf, vine, and shadow had witnessed the creature claim its prey and now waited for the next moment of blood. Lieutenant Tanaka led his trembling platoon at first light, forcing them forward through tangled undergrowth because staying still meant death. Yet every step deeper into the forest felt like descending into the throat of a living beast. The men whispered prayers under their breath, clutching rifles slick with sweat, and though Tanaka tried to project strength, fear gnawed at the edges of his thoughts as he replayed the image of glowing eyes staring down at him from the treetops. Eyes filled with intelligence, hunger, and an ancient cruelty. The trail ahead suddenly shifted from soft earth to a wide clearing where the ground had been churned violently, as if something massive had swept through, leaving giant drag marks cutting across the soil in erratic patterns. Shurjin crouched to inspect them, voice cracking as he whispered that the impressions weren't footprints, but lengthwise grooves, like something had been slithering, something large enough to move trees aside like grass. Before Tanaka could respond, a foul wind swept across the clearing, carrying the sour stench of decay. Birds exploded from the treetops, screeching as they fled, and the soldiers instinctively raised their rifles, forming a shaky line as their nerves frayed. They found remnants of Ishikawa scattered near a fallen log, shredded fabric caught on bark, a broken dog tag snapped in half, and blood sprayed across the leaves in a pattern that looked more like claw marks than tooth wounds, as if the creature tore him open with unnatural precision. Tanaka forced the men to keep moving, but the deeper they marched, the quieter the jungle became until the silence grew suffocating, heavy enough to press against their ears. Even insects dared not make a sound, and the sudden absence of nature felt more terrifying than the creature's whisper. The path narrowed into a winding corridor of vines that twisted downward like ropes leading into darkness. And as the soldiers entered, the temperature dropped sharply, turning warm, humid air into a cold, suffocating breath that clung to their skin. Corporal Renji muttered that they had crossed into cursed land, and though Tanaka chastised him, he could not deny that every instinct screamed they were no longer in a place meant for humans. A rhythmic thumping began to echo through the trees. Quiet at first, then stronger like distant drums made of bone and skin, and the sound grew closer, steadier, deliberate, as though something was stalking them from all directions. The men tightened into formation, eyes darting between shadows that shifted without wind, and Tanaka's own heartbeat synchronized with the eerie pounding until it felt like the jungle itself had a pulse. Suddenly, Private Ono stumbled onto a hidden ravine, nearly falling before Tanaka grabbed his collar and pulled him back. Below them lay a pit lined with skeletal remains, some animal, some unmistakably human, arranged in layered rings as if collected over decades. Their rib cages cracked open in the same precise fashion as Ishikawa's wounds, their skulls piled neatly in the center like grotesque trophies. The soldiers staggered backward in horror, and as they did, Tanaka noticed something carved into the trunk of a massive tree overlooking the ravine. Ancient symbols, spirals, and jagged lines etched deep into the bark, forming a primitive warning. Shurjin translated them with trembling lips, recognizing fragments from old local legends. Do not enter. Do not feed. Do not wake. Before Tanaka could issue an order, the drumming stopped abruptly, replaced by a low, guttural hum vibrating through the earth beneath their boots. Trees shivered. The ground trembled. Leaves rose as if pulled upward by invisible breath. Then from somewhere above, a whisper drifted down, long, drawn out, and starving, hungry. The men broke into panic, some firing blindly into the canopy while others dropped to their knees, clutching their helmets as a shadow darted between branches faster than their eyes could follow. Tanaka bellowed for discipline, but the jungle erupted in chaos as something massive leapt from treetop to treetop, circling them, playing with them, hurting them like prey. And then the realization struck Tanaka with cold horror. The creature wasn't hunting. It was guiding them somewhere, driving them deeper into the forest, away from escape, toward whatever nightmare awaited in the heart of the jungle. The jungle grew darker as Tanaka's platoon was driven deeper into its labyrinth, the air thickening with a suffocating heaviness that made every breath feel borrowed. And though the sun still hung somewhere above the canopy, almost no light reached the forest floor, leaving the men to march through a world of shifting silhouettes and cold, damp soil that seemed to swallow their footsteps. The creature's presence stalked them relentlessly, never fully seen, never fully silent. Its movements a blur of rustling leaves, cracking branches, and that low, unnatural whisper that slithered through their ears like a living parasite, always repeating the same word in a voice that sounded both childlike and monstrous. Hungry. By noon, morale had deteriorated into near mutiny. Corporal Renji insisted they retreat while they still could, claiming that the forest spirits had marked them, while Private Ono begged Tanaka to call for an airdrop extraction even though they had no working radio left, its circuits fried during the night, as if something had tampered with it. Tanaka tried to maintain order, but doubt gnawed at him like insects beneath his skin. Why had the creature not killed them all at once? Why did it herd them instead, driving them along a path that felt too deliberate, too calculated, as though they were pieces on a board only it understood? The answers seemed to arrive when they stumbled into a clearing unlike anything they had seen. Towering stone monoliths arranged in a circular pattern, covered in ancient carvings that resembled the symbols from the ravine, but far more intricate, spiraling outward in patterns that made the soldiers dizzy if they stared too long, as if the shapes tugged at their minds. At the center of the stone circle lay a massive depression in the earth, an enormous nest-like structure made of interwoven branches, bones, shredded fabric, and scraps of metal from decades-old military gear, all arranged with disturbing precision. Shurjin approached it cautiously, poking the edge with his rifle, and instantly recoiled when he realized the bones were not only human but recent, the marrow still wet, the gore still fresh enough to attract swarms of flies that buzzed in frenzied orbit. Before Tanaka could pull the group away, the sky itself seemed to shift. Birds fled in a chaotic flurry, and the canopy above began to tremble with a rising vibration, building like a storm that had no wind, no rain, only sound, deep, resonant, rhythmic, like something enormous breathing in the treetops. The soldiers froze, rifles raised, eyes wide with terror as the shaking grew violent, branches bending unnaturally, leaves falling in waves until the forest rained green. Then came the howl, a piercing, bone-shattering scream that tore through the jungle like a blade, so loud and unnatural it felt as though the air itself split open. Every man dropped to his knees, hands clamped over his ears as the sound vibrated through their skulls, threatening to tear their minds apart. The howl rose higher, sharper, morphing into a series of clicks and growls that echoed from multiple directions at once, as if more than one creature called out, answering each other with savage hunger. Tanaka forced himself to stand, vision blurred, head pounding, and through the chaos he saw shadows moving in the canopy. Multiple large shapes darting between branches with impossible speed, their silhouettes long-limbed, hunched, and disturbingly humanoid. There are more of them, Shurjin whispered weakly, voice quivering with hopeless terror. This isn't one creature, it's a colony. Tanaka's stomach dropped as the realization hit him like a bullet. The nest in the clearing was not a home. It was a feeding ground, and they had entered the center of a hunting territory shared by multiple predators. Before the men could retreat, the canopy burst downward as a massive shadow dove toward them, landing with a thunderous impact that shook the monoliths. Tanaka glimpsed a flash of pale skin, elongated limbs, and teeth like polished obsidian before the creature retreated back into the darkness, moving with deliberate, strategic intelligence. The howl ceased abruptly, replaced by a chilling silence, and in that silence, the whisper returned, not from one direction but from every tree, every shadow, every inch of the canopy above them. Hungry, the men realized then that they were surrounded, trapped in the monster's nest, and the hunt had only just begun. Night fell with unnatural speed, swallowing the clearing of monoliths in a suffocating blackness that felt almost intentional, as if the creatures themselves commanded the darkness to descend. The air thickened into a cold, metallic fog, and the Japanese soldiers huddled together in a tight circle around their dim lantern, its weak flame trembling like it feared what lurked beyond its glow. Tanaka ordered the men to conserve ammunition, but the rifles in their hands felt useless against something that moved with the speed of a ghost and the intelligence of a hunter that had studied men for generations. The trees around them shifted in slow, rhythmic waves, despite the absence of wind, creating the illusion that the entire forest was breathing, long, hungry breaths, inhaling the scent of fear. Then came the first drop, a warm splash that hit Shurgen's cheek. He wiped it, expecting rain, but instead his fingers came away smeared with something thick and red. Before he could warn anyone, more drops began to fall, slow at first, then rapidly, until crimson droplets rained down through the canopy like the sky itself was bleeding. The men panicked, scrambling to shield their faces as the red rain intensified, streaking down tree trunks and splattering across the monoliths, turning the ancient carvings into grotesque, blood-painted warnings. Renji shouted that this was an omen of death, while Ono collapsed to his knees, sobbing that the forest was marking them for consumption. Tanaka forced himself to remain steady, shouting for discipline, but even he felt sick as he realized the smell in the air wasn't metallic like blood. It was sweet, foul, and rotting. This wasn't rain. It wasn't natural, and it wasn't coming from the sky. Above them, movement rippled through the treetops, and Tanaka lifted his lantern toward the source. The dim light revealed massive silhouettes hanging upside down from branches, dozens of them, each creature cradling what looked like a freshly killed animal or human, draining the bodies and letting the excess blood drip down onto the platoon below like a horrific ritual shower. One of the corpses fell from above, smashing onto the ground with a sickening thud, its chest completely hollowed out, its face frozen in silent terror. The soldiers screamed and stumbled back, but the forest offered no escape, only walls of darkness and whispering leaves that mocked their desperation. Then the whispers started again, slow and synchronized, echoing from every direction, from every creature above. Hungry, hungry, hungry. The sound vibrated through the clearing, seeping beneath the soldier's skin like living poison. As the whispers grew louder, the creatures began to descend, not in a chaotic rush, but in a calculated, coordinated manner, their long, pale limbs unfolding like horrifying spiders emerging from cocoons. Their bodies were lean and elongated, their skin stretched tight over sinewy muscles, their eyes glowing with a cold, predatory intelligence that suggested they understood fear intimately and savored it. Tanaka fired the first shot, hitting one creature square in the chest. But instead of falling, it simply recoiled, hissed, and leapt aside with terrifying agility, as if bullets meant nothing more than an annoyance. The other soldiers fired wildly, muzzle flashes illuminating the monsters briefly, faces distorted, jaws too wide, teeth like carved obsidian blades, before they vanished into the darkness again. Suddenly, Renji was yanked upward with such force that his boots flew off. His screams cut short as a creature dragged him into the canopy, leaving only a trail of blood dripping down like a broken string of beads. Ono turned and ran blindly into the forest, disappearing into the darkness as the creatures pursued him with chilling glee, their movements so silent they made no more noise than falling leaves. Tanaka grabbed Shurgen's arm and shouted that they had to move, that staying in the clearing was suicide, and together they bolted into the forest, sprinting through undergrowth as the whispers chased them like a swarm of invisible demons, repeating endlessly, "Hungry, hungry," until Tanaka realized with horrific clarity that the creatures were not merely hunting them. They were enjoying it. Tanaka and Shurgen crashed through the undergrowth like desperate animals, lungs burning, boots slipping on wet leaves as the whispers trailed behind them like a swarm of spectral insects, each breath of the jungle filled with the same word that had become a curse, hungry, echoing from tree to tree, branch to branch, as though the very forest had learned the creature's language. The two men didn't dare look back. The sound of snapping branches, skittering limbs, and the sickening wet thump of something massive landing behind them was warning enough that the monsters were close, too close. They burst through a wall of bamboo-like stalks and stumbled into a vast valley carved deep within the jungle, a hidden basin untouched by sunlight, where a suffocating fog rolled across the ground like a living thing. Their feet struck something hard beneath the mist bone. Countless bones. Tanaka lifted the lantern just enough to reveal the horrific truth. The valley floor was a graveyard stretching for hundreds of meters, a sea of human and animal remains arranged in complex spirals, lines, and circles that resembled ritualistic patterns or perhaps territorial markers. Shurjin gagged and covered his mouth, whispering that these weren't random leftovers. They were arranged with intention, purpose, maybe communication. As they cautiously made their way across the bone field, the mist thickened, swirling around their legs like cold fingers. Then something cracked beneath Tanaka's boot, an intact skull that split cleanly in half, releasing a rotten stench that made his eyes water. But the sound of the breaking skull triggered something else. A deep, rumbling growl rolled through the valley, resonating through the bones beneath their feet as if awakening an ancient guardian. Tanaka froze, holding his breath. The rumble grew louder, shaking the ground in ripples, until the fog parted to reveal carved stone pillars scattered across the valley, each one etched with symbols similar to the monoliths, but darker, more primitive, as though warning intruders that they had entered sacred feeding territory. Suddenly, the bone spirals began to shift, not by themselves, but from something moving beneath them, something burrowing. Tanaka grabbed Shurjin and pulled him back as the bones erupted upward, scattering in every direction as a massive shape surged from below, pale and serpentine, its elongated spine ridged with bony plates. It wasn't fully visible, just glimpses through the mist. A gaping maw filled with jagged teeth, eyes like dead lanterns, limbs too long and jointed in unnatural angles. Shurjin screamed and fired his rifle, but the bullets only grazed the creature's hide, ricocheting off with metallic clangs. The beast lunged, striking like a whip, and only Tanaka's frantic shove saved Shurjin from being ripped in half. The two soldiers ran again, stumbling over skulls and rib cages as the massive creature slithered and bounded after them, its movements accompanied by a chorus of smaller whispers in the canopy above, other creatures closing in, eager to join the hunt. The valley seemed to tilt, forcing them toward a narrow, rocky passage that led deeper underground. With no other choice, Tanaka shoved Shurjin into the passage, diving after him just as the massive creature slammed into the entrance, its jaws snapping inches from their boots. Darkness swallowed them as they tumbled down a steep, uneven tunnel, bones rattling and dust swirling until they crashed into a subterranean cavern illuminated by weak bioluminescent fungi clinging to the rock walls like dying stars. Here the air was colder, the silence thicker, yet Tanaka sensed they were not safe, only deeper in the nightmare. The cavern was lined with ancient cave paintings, primitive depictions of humanoid figures battling elongated monsters with too many limbs, the artwork dripping with crimson pigment that looked disturbingly like dried blood. At the center of the cavern lay a stone altar piled with offerings, some ancient, some horrifyingly recent. As Shurjin trembled and whispered prayers, Tanaka stepped closer and saw something that froze his spine. Dog tags. Dozens of them. Japanese, American, Australian. Soldiers from decades of war. All arranged in a pattern around the altar, and carved into the stone beside them, in shaky old Japanese characters, with the final words of some long-dead soldier, "Do not run." They hunger for the chase. Before Tanaka could react, the sound of claws scraped the tunnel behind them, followed by the whisper that now echoed inside their skulls like a nightmare made flesh, hungry. Tanaka dragged Shurjin deeper into the cavern, just as the creature's claws scraped against the stone entrance, sparks flying as it tried to force its way inside, its guttural snarls echoing like thunder trapped underground, and the two soldiers sprinted through the twisting tunnels lit only by the faint blue glow of the fungi that coated the walls like veins of dying light. The air was thick with the stench of rot and damp earth, and every step stirred clouds of dust and bone fragments, reminders of how many had come before them and never left. As they rounded a sharp bend, the tunnel suddenly widened into a massive subterranean chamber that took Tanaka's breath away. A colossal underground temple carved directly from the bedrock, its towering pillars shaped like twisting humanoid forms with elongated limbs and gaping mouths, frozen mid-scream as though the stone itself had once been alive. Ancient murals sprawled across the walls, depicting monstrous creatures descending from the treetops, devouring entire battalions of soldiers, tribes, and animals alike. The style changed across eras, showing different generations of victims, proof that whatever hunted them was older than warfare, older than civilization, possibly older than man itself. At the far end of the chamber stood a massive stone door carved with spirals identical to those in the Bone Valley, but more intricate, radiating with a faint pulse like a heartbeat trapped in stone. Shurjin whispered that the door felt alive, that the carvings were watching them, and Tanaka, though unwilling to admit it, felt the same cold pressure against his mind, as if unseen eyes traced every movement. Then they heard it. Footsteps. Not the heavy thud of the massive beast from the valley, but light, skittering steps. Many of them. Creatures crawling along the ceiling and walls, their shadows flickering in the dim glow like ghostly spiders. Tanaka raised his rifle, but saw only glimpses of pale limbs darting in and out of the darkness, circling them, driving them toward the stone door as if herding them into a trap. Desperate, Tanaka pushed against the ancient slab, expecting centuries-old rock to resist, but instead it shifted with a slow, grinding groan, moving far too easily, as though something on the other side wanted it opened. A cold wind rushed out, carrying a smell so ancient and foul it made Shurjin gag. But they had no choice. The creatures were closing in, their whispers merging into a chilling chorus that filled the chamber like the voice of a starving god, hungry. With a final shove, the door opened enough for them to slip through, entering a vast hall deeper than the jungle above, lined with towering statues of the creatures, each one different, each posed as if in ritual worship. In the center lay an enormous pit, wide and circular, its edges lined with teeth carved from stone, and from within came a soft, almost soothing hum that vibrated through Tanaka's bones, lulling him toward the edge as though calling him by name. Shurjin grabbed him, shouting that it was a trap, but before they could retreat, the temple shuddered violently and the ground split around the pit, releasing a swarm of smaller creatures, child-sized, pale, emaciated things that screeched as they crawled toward the two men with frantic, jerking movements. Tanaka fired wildly, the muzzle flashes briefly illuminating the nightmare. Tiny faces twisted in eternal hunger, jaws snapping, limbs contorting as they lunged across the stone floor. Shurjin screamed as one leapt onto him, clawing at his chest, and Tanaka tackled it off, the two soldiers stumbling backward until they reached a narrow stone bridge that crossed the massive pit. With no other escape, they ran across the bridge as hundreds of the creatures poured into the hall, crawling over the statues, the walls, the ceiling, all converging on the pit like an unholy congregation. Halfway across, a thunderous roar erupted behind them, the massive beast from the valley forcing its way into the chamber, its colossal form squeezing through the tunnel, bones cracking, stone breaking under its weight. Tanaka and Shurjin sprinted toward the far door as the bridge shook under the monster's charge, its eyes blazing with a hunger older than time, its whisper now a deafening scream that filled the temple. Hungry! And just as Tanaka reached the doorway and pulled Shurjin through, the bridge collapsed behind them, sending the swarm and the giant beast plummeting into the glowing abyss of the pit below. Tanaka and Shurjin stumbled into the final chamber, slamming the stone door shut behind them, just as the deafening echoes of collapsing rock and the monstrous roars from the abyss thundered through the tunnels. the entire temple trembling as though the jungle above was collapsing into its ancient stomach. The two soldiers slid to the ground, gasping for breath, their bodies bruised and cut, their uniforms soaked in sweat, dust, and the blood of creatures they still struggled to comprehend. The chamber was smaller than the others, circular and eerily pristine, its walls covered in spirals that glowed faintly like embers dying in the dark. In the center stood a single pedestal carved from obsidian, smooth and cold, atop which rested a small clay tablet, fragile, cracked, and painted with symbols Tanaka recognized from earlier chambers. Warnings, death rituals, feeding cycles. As he stepped closer, a strange warmth radiated from the tablet, pulsing like a heartbeat, and when he brushed away the dust, he found writing etched in Japanese, a dialect from over a century ago, older than any military record. Shurjin whispered that it must be from soldiers who had vanished long before their war, perhaps from explorers or convicts forced into the jungle generations earlier. The script was shaky but clear. They do not hunt for meat. They hunt for fear. The chase is the feast. The kill is mercy. Tanaka's stomach twisted. Everything made sense now. The herding, the red rain ritual, the drawn-out torment. The creatures fed on terror itself, savoring it like beasts savor blood. Before he could share the revelation, the temple shook violently, and cracks spidered across the ceiling as an ear-splitting screech tore through the stone. One of the creatures had survived the fall. Dust rained from above, and a massive claw punched through the ceiling, followed by a pale, elongated arm dripping with blood from fresh wounds. Shurjin screamed and backed away as the creature's head forced its way through the gap, its glowing eyes sweeping the chamber with furious hunger. Tanaka fired his last bullets, the shots tearing chunks of flesh, but failing to slow the monster. It roared, shaking the chamber with its fury, its jaws unhinging to reveal rows of needle-like teeth dripping with saliva and remnants of bone. With the pedestal trembling beneath him, Tanaka realized the spirals carved into the walls were not decorations. They were a mechanism. He pressed a sequence of symbols, feeling the stone vibrate beneath his fingertips, and suddenly the chamber erupted with ancient machinery, gears grinding beneath the floor, walls shifting as if the temple itself were waking from a century-long slumber. A deep rumble rose from the pit below, and a horrific wind began pulling inward, violent, powerful, like a vortex dragging everything toward the center of the room. The creature shrieked as the suction intensified, its claws digging into the stone as it fought to resist. But the force grew stronger, tearing chunks of debris from the ceiling, pulling dust, rocks, and shattered bones into the swirling void. Shurjin lost his footing and tumbled toward the vortex, screaming Tanaka's name. Without hesitation, Tanaka dived and grabbed his arm, his muscles straining as the ancient mechanism roared, the spirals blazing with blinding light. The monster lunged at them in a final desperate strike, its jaws snapping inches from Tanaka's face, the hot stench of its breath washing over him. But then the pull of the vortex tore it backward, ripping its limbs from the stone, dragging it screaming into the spiraling light. The chamber shook violently, and with one final howl of rage, the creature vanished into the abyss. Tanaka pulled Shurjin back as the pedestal cracked and the light began to die, the rumbling fading into silence. For a moment, there was only stillness, heavy, sacred, and haunting. When they pushed open the opposite door, they found themselves in a narrow passage that led upward toward faint daylight and the distant sound of birds. As they emerged from the earth, the jungle greeted them not with whispers, but with calm silence. The air felt lighter, the shadows less hungry. They collapsed onto the mossy ground, staring at the sky as dawn broke above the canopy. Tanaka whispered that humanity would never believe what they had seen, and Shurjin, trembling, replied that belief didn't matter. Survival did. Behind them, the earth rumbled softly, as though something ancient shifted deep below, then fell still once more. The jungle, for now, had eaten its fill,